Today, I'll teach you step by step how to use the Falloff layer in Cavalry to create this effect. And this was inspired by Abstract's really cool animation on Instagram. And later, we'll also take a look at how to apply this effect to text shapes as he did in the original. To start, hold Alt and then click the ellipse shape button here to add an ellipse shape. And then we can reduce the radius down to 30. And you can hold Alt and then hit Enter to change both values. Then we can add a duplicator by clicking here. And now we have this grid by 3 by 3 and we can set it to 10 instead. And then we can also increase the size to something larger, like around 800 is good for this animation. Now this is a quite boring color, so we can change the color, and I've selected 3 colors from a palette over here, so you can just copy the color if you want, and we're gonna add the red color here to the ellipse shape. Along with that, we can also change the background color here, and I have this sort of warm white color we can drag onto the background here. Now, as of right now, the ellipse shapes are sort of one object inside of the duplicator, and we want to access them individually. So we need to add a deformer called submesh. And in here, we can then go ahead and select it, and we can now try to change the position, and you'll see all the shapes are changing. But here's where falloffs come into the picture. If we try to add a falloff to this submesh, we'll see we have this circle right here. And if we go ahead and go back into the submesh here and then change the position, you will see only the ellipses inside of the falloff range will be affected. And this is quite useful. So we can, for example, set the position to 100 right now. And we're definitely getting closer to the effect we want, but the ellipses are only moving upwards. And the way to fix this and to make them go away from the center is to go into the duplicator and see the shape rotation. Changing this, we'll see that all of the shapes are moving in a different direction. So we can actually make this shape rotation be individual for each shape. So we can add a behavior by right clicking and then selecting look at. And now you'll see it looks a little weird right now, but first of all, let's set an actual target for this look at, and that's going to be the fall off. And if we go ahead and, for example, move the fall off around now, you will see that all of the shapes are sort of going inwards of this fall off behavior. And we want to get them to move outwards. So we can set the position to -100 instead. And now you'll see actually the basics of this effect is working. But there are still 3 things we can do before moving on to applying this effect to text shapes. And the first thing we can do is we can go into the submesh, and then we can reduce the scale by holding Alt and dragging on one value. And you'll now see that in the center or around this fall off, we'll see that it scales down. We can also select the fall off and then increase the size to 250 to have the effect be larger. And let's also reset the position here of the fall off. So we can now add an image or shape in the center here. And for that, I'm going to use an image of a cursor. I'm just going to drag it in and then move it to the top of the layer panel here. And then I'm going to also shrink it down a bit to 35 by 35. And we now have this cursor, but it won't move the fall off. To do that, we need to drag the fall off inside of the image or the shape. And then we need to lock the layer so that we don't accidentally move it independently of the cursor itself. And now we can move on to applying this effect to text shapes. Now we have set up the general effect, so we can just duplicate this composition we have right now by pressing Ctrl D with it selected. And then we need to change the distribution mode on the duplicator since we don't want it to be a grid, but rather a text shape. So we can click on the distribution right here, and then we need to select voxelize, which will distribute the points onto a shape. And for that, we need to add a text shape. And then we can make the adjustments as we want. For this, I aligned it on both axes in the center, as well as changing the font size to 350. And the font you can choose yourself. For this, I used Inter Display. And then instead of regular, I chose bold. Now for the text string itself, I just left it at Cavalry. And now comes the interesting part, because we can go into the duplicator here and then drag in this text shape here into the input shape. and it'll look a little weird right now, but we can disable the visibility of the text shape. But you'll see the ellipses are overlapping, so we can go into the ellipse shape here and then reduce the size by holding Alt, and then we'll just go down until we see that they sort of are touching each other but not overlapping. And this will look quite cool in my opinion, but there are a few adjustments you can make to actually alter the animation. So you can go into the duplicator here, and then you can increase the size if you want a more low resolution animation, and this will also allow you to increase the ellipsis radius again if you want larger ellipses. And you can also go into the text shape, and now changing the font size, we'll see that both the ellipsis distance between each other as well as their radius will stay the same, but you can change the whole size of the text shape. And this allows for some pretty cool animations. Now, if you like this type of effect, I think you'd like this video too.